Thank you for joining us today. I'm Johnny Anderson. I'm joined today by Trevor Loudon from trevorloudon.com and keywiki.org, Jeff Nyquist from jrnyquist.blog, and Jimmy from Brooklyn. Bear with me, gentlemen. I am just getting over a sickness, as all of you have been made aware of, so I appreciate your patience. Trevor, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks, Johnny. Good to see you guys.
And you, sir. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Very well. Jimmy, how you doing?
Doing good.
That's good. That's good. I suppose let's begin with this. We were as before we started here, we were talking about Dugan and his all of his little networks of influence, and we were discussing some of the more prominent people that are tied into to these networks. And we were talking earlier, Jeff, about how some of these former Russian, I guess you'd call them expats, dissidents, the ones that have spoken out against the regime, are now living in exile in other countries, other Asian countries, and they're being called traitors, and they're fearing for their lives now and publicly saying that, they aren't going anywhere near Windows. They love their life. They love their family. And if anyone makes a move on them, per se, then they're telling them where to look. So then these are dangerous people, is the point I'm trying to make.
As I told you, I just got Evi Kolakari, who's an Albanian American real estate agent from real estate broker from Queens, I believe, who's done a lot of work for the Albanian government and very much against the Serbians, etc. Put out a tweet the other day. Is it something along the lines of the Duganite assets in the administration are compiling a list of people to go after, and Loudon's at the top of it. So
and you're on that list,
that was
too.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
What do they mean by go after you?
Well, what do you mean? See, I was as I've mentioned before, Darren Beattie, who's in the State Department. I had a little argument with him a little while ago, who wanted me to take down a post on him in KeyWiki, my website KeyWiki, and because he's in charge of cultural affairs in the State Department, very much a pro-Dugan guy, very, very anti-Britain, very militantly anti-NATO and this kind of thing. And I've put some of this information online, and he wanted me to take it down. And when I refused, he threatened me with lawyers. He had already gotten the Daily Telegraph to take down an article accusing his Russian wife of being connected to an oligarch who was connected to Putin. And he disputes that point. And I took that information down because I couldn't prove it other than through the Telegraph article, which has now been retracted. But I put a whole bunch of other stuff up there. So I'm just wondering if that triggered something, or generally speaking, that we have all been speaking out against Dugan, about Putin, about some of the Putin Republicans, the circle of people around Trump who are trying to push him in a pro-Russian direction. And you got to think they're aware of this, and you got to think they're going to start pushing back. And so I think we need to push back harder, basically. The harder they push, the harder we should push.
Yeah. So you think that they want to make trouble for you by contradicting you, fighting, opposing whatever you say?
No, I suspect more that there could be dirty tricks involved, like government agencies snooping around, or that's. And I'm not saying this is connected to my argument with Beattie, because I don't know that. I'm just saying it's interesting that would happen. And then I get this obscure threat, this on the internet.
They will make things inconvenient for you. No, you're absolutely right about that. So they'll send people to just menace you and intimidate you, if you know what I'm trying to say. So they'll threaten you, they'll follow you, they'll listen in on your phone calls, send you the odd creepy email kind of thing, just to get you to shut up and go away kind of thing.
Well, look, I'll tell you a story. This happened to me back in the 1980s in New Zealand. I had a campaign in New Zealand against Soviet fishing boats coming to our ports, because they were spy ships, And I was working for a friend at the time in his bakery. He was making chocolate chip cookies, and I would go down and help from time to time because I had some experience in that. And I was staying with a friend at a friend's place called Terry O'Kane was his name, now since deceased. And I go down to the one night about 11 o'clock, I get a call from the bakery owner, can I come down and help on the morning shift? And I said, yeah, sure. So I go down there at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm baking away. 11 o'clock, I get a call from the office. And they said, and I got on the phone and he said, this guy said, this is Major Gorkowski of the KGB here, in a Russian accent. And I thought it was my friend Terry. And I said, oh, bugger off, Terry, don't be stupid. And he just carried on, you see, because nobody knew I was there except Terry, my flatmate, and the people who had invited me down there. So, and then he carried on. He said, we understand you've been making some rather anti-Soviet statements lately. You'd be advised to stop this unless something rather unfortunate should happen to you. We have been watching you. We are watching you as we have been watching you for some time. Do svidaniya, Mr. Loudon, and hung up. So I looked in the Soviet embassy records, you know, the list of diplomats, and there was a Gorkowski in the Soviet embassy. So it could have been the Soviets, it could have been local communists, or it might have been our intelligence services just wanting me to stop making a nuisance of myself. But either way, it was somebody who had been following me, because how else would they have known that I was down at this bakery? And so what did I do? I just kept doing what I'm doing, and I've been doing it for 40 years since. So you're going to get this kind of crap. And you've had instances, Jimmy, you got that assault, and that could have been a warning. It could have been a random incident. It could have been somebody watching you. But these things happen. But so what? What's more important? We got to live in a free world, do we not?
Yeah, I once asked the defective Colonel Stanislav Lunev, they've got you, they're going to kill you if they can find you. And I said, how do you deal with that? And he said, I have to do what I'm going to do. I can't allow myself to think about it.
Yeah.
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 Whatever they do to you. Yeah.
You got to have your eye on eternity, don't you? What is right in the long run? Mm-hmm. Where are we going to be in 1,000 years?
Yeah. That's right. I mean, I think we all have received death threats. At one time, I have received them before.
Well, you had an incident, didn't you? As some guys picked you up in a car and,
Well, I actually picked up a guy, but it was, I was told that there was this guy that wanted to meet with me I was told he was an assassin and then not to meet with him. I was also warned that they were trying to entrap me in Europe in something. Yeah. So I've received 2 warnings about they would like to do something to me if they could get near to me. It's a trouble.
I was told that if I didn't get at least 3 death threats per week, I wasn't doing a good enough job. So, that's I suppose.
Well, we're all slackers compared to you, then, Johnny.
Yeah,
apparently.
Of course, you worked in the criminal investigations area. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a code over there. I mean, in the criminal world, it's a bit interesting because over there, you know where you stand. Right. It's just it's one of those where you do things as you're told and you don't step out of as you put it, Jeff, you stay in your lane kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And if you challenge someone, then you better be prepared to deal with whatever that challenge is going to be if it fails. So if you know what I mean. So it's a different world over there, and it's one that demands respect and demands loyalty in its own way. So when you go after these people, when you investigate their dealings, because they will, that part of the world will ignore you. They don't want any more trouble on them, right? They've got enough. They're already in trouble by being in that world. So they don't want any more exposure. So if you investigate them, they will leave you alone until you start to interfere in their affairs, right? Once you do that, then as we're sitting here discussing, then they will start to make trouble for you. They'll start coming around. They'll start harassing you, harassing your family, threatening your family, killing your dog, killing your cat, whatever, these kind of things, right, just to send you a message. The average person is going to get the message like that and go away because they don't want any trouble. So that's basically kind of what they do. But there's also a respect that's given in a sense. So I believe that you were told at one point in time, I'm not going to go into the details of the conversation, but you were called the respectable enemy. There's a respect there to someone that understands them and can defeat them. If they feel as though that you are a serious threat and you have enough knowledge on them that can harm them, because you know the interworkings of their organizations and how their strategies work, they will respect you for that. They won't like you, in a sense, but at the same time, there's a respect there.
Well, they normally kill people who have compromised themselves and belong to them. So if you belong to them, if you're a Russian national, if you've been part of their apparatus or one of their outlying groups, they have the right, because you're a traitor if you don't do what they say. So then you've broken the rules. We have to get you. But if you're outside of that, it's a slightly different set of circumstances.
They have no other option. I mean, if you're in that world and you take money from them, they look for a way to get their hooks into you. Once they have you, then essentially they own you. This is why people are told never take money from the sharks, never take money from the mob, because that interest is never coming off.
No, and that's the thing is because they penetrated the right and the left, just about every organization and the money that's handed out to people, people don't realize where the money is ultimately coming from. And I think we're going to find out more about this in the future. But organized crime is connected to Russia and China. In all of its, they got into the idea more than 65 years ago, Operation Friendship of Nations, to take control of the international drug trade. Now, they don't have total control over it, of course, but a huge amount of the money laundering and drug trade in the world, and then the organized crime related to it, they've sucked in all three major Italian mafias are involved with Moscow. The Mexican mafia is under the Russian mafia. You've got the mafias in Canada and the triads. I mean, goodness knows Australia's kind of got two major native mafias that have been involved with the triads. So because Australia always, it was a colony of criminals originally. So you have a problem there in Australia, a serious problem in Australia.
And Japan, the Yakuza in Japan.
And the Yakuza in Japan. So I think these groups also, secret societies, you go to China, they're also related to occult practices, especially in the Orient, but also some in the West, some of the occult groups in Brazil, for example. And of course, this is really frightening because Dugan, who's sort of the intellectual mafia of the communist bloc, who talks about Guinan and talks about magic and being an orthodox or an old believer. He's been involved in Aleister Crowley's ritual type magic, and he has brought that in to the networks that are putting out the propaganda, both in the United States and elsewhere, that America should be with Russia and Ukraine is bad, and that MAGA should signify America ruling the Western Hemisphere, and Russia gets Europe and China gets the Far East. That, of course, would completely collapse our defense structures in the first world. But this is what they're kind of preaching. And it's all mixed in the occult, which is shocking to me to find out how much this is. Of course, the pedophile networks are connected to the occult. We see that in the Franklin cover-up. There's some kind of an occult practice there.
See, it is my suspicion, very strong suspicion, that many of the so-called MAGA Republicans, they're all Duganites. Nick Fuentes is a Duganite. Richard Spencer is a Duganite. Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Jack Posobiec, they're all Duganites. And so how much, anybody who's into Dugan is dabbling in some degree with the occult. They're dabbling with the dark side. Is that the glue that binds them together? Is that really where some of these people are coming from?
I think at the top levels, yes, you could make that assumption. Yeah.
When you look at Teitelbaum's book, what is it, The War for Eternity, which is the book about Bannon and people associated with Bannon. He has Bannon, a lot of interviews with Bannon, and Bannon is saying, I'm interested in mysticism. I used to hang out at the Bodhi tree down in LA, and, that's an occult bookstore in California and Los Angeles. It's very, very strange. And of course, Bannon professing an interest in Julius Evola. Well, Julius Evola was originally an occultist in the school of René Guénon. And this is really heavy mysticism. This is ritual magic. Evola worked for the SS for Heinrich Himmler's SS on occult projects during World War II. It's an area that the mainstream media is not going to touch with a 10-foot pole, but it is very real. And there's something there, and it's disturbing.
Well, you think, we well know that the Nazis were very tied into the occult. Well, I believe the same would be said for the communists, that we know that, the theosophists and a lot of these people in the 19th century, there was a really permeable thing between the occultists and the socialists and all of these mystic schools and Marxism. They were all very much cross-pollinated and interrelated. And, you look at Marx himself, who was at least flirted with devil worship, to put it mildly. So I think this is the underlying current that binds, these Nazis, these alt-righters, these Putin Republicans. I think you'll find that there's occult threads that run through this.
This kind of plays into, combining all these things together. This plays into the cultural subversion kind of thing, and this is what you talk about a lot, Jimmy, with Gramsci's strategy kind of thing.
Oh, interesting. Getting back to the threats, intimidation, that old saying, you kill one, you frighten 1,000. On a larger scale, you saw what happened in Canada with the truckers, because they weren't going along with the government. So then they were denied the use of their bank accounts. They were denied to buy gasoline. Attorneys who would work for Trump or maybe start working for Trump, they'd be threatened. So there's a way to stop people that get in the way by intimidation. But when you have, like the Soviets in the past, they were known for car crashes. So everybody has a car. It's not hard to set up a car to crash. You could do something with the brake, with the fluid lines. There's things you could do, and it would look like an accident. But also, think about this. Now, my mind gets very devious sometimes. I could see things that's probably not healthy to be able to think this way. But studying the enemy, it makes your mind kind of expand and see all kind of possibilities and threats. You could be a person like maybe doing what we're doing, or maybe a congressman, senator, maybe a top U.S. intelligence agent, somebody on the Supreme Court, any powerful, influential position. You go out with your family. You might go to McDonald's. You go to the movies. You go to the park with the kids. And, guy has a couple of drinks. You got to go to the men's room. Well, you're standing in the men's room, and you're standing at the stall, and the guy comes in also using the men's room, stands right beside you, and he tells you, I know who you are. I know you're on the Supreme Court. Your mother lives at 328 Chauncey Street, whatever. You better not do what you're doing, or you're going to have a problem. And then, he zippers up and walks out. That kind of threat could happen all the time. That could explain why some people in high positions are doing, saying, or doing something that just doesn't fit. It's easy to threaten somebody and then you neutralize them. So you could be neutralized or you could be made to go on the other side. Look how easy that is. You could have all the protection in the world, bodyguards and everything, but they can't be with you every minute. There's always a chance at the men's room, some random seeming meeting, and a guy could give you a threat, but it's not the kind of threat he could be arrested for. It's a warning. And by giving personal information about a family member, where they are, maybe a kid in college in another state, that's going to be powerful. That's going to be powerful. And the enemy is extremely devious. They're brilliant and extremely devious. So the work we're doing and other people that may be doing work sort of threatening to the enemy, every one of us are vulnerable. Remember in Vietnam, I think it was it in Hawaii? I get mixed up. One of the cities, when the communists came in and took over, they had a list of people to be killed. So the enemy builds lists. They are aware of who's a threat to them, and they have spotters who don't expose themselves. They just spot whoever is a potential threat to them, or somebody potentially who could help them. So you have people like that on college campuses. They could spot bright students, somebody that has to be neutralized, or somebody they could pull on their side. And when you see Bill Clinton visited the Soviet Union as a student and stayed at the home of the founder of the Czechoslovak Communist Party, clearly they had their eyes on Clinton earlier, the same way with Obama and I mean, there's a whole lot of potential threats out there.
Yeah. I think to the recruitment point, that's exactly what they do, isn't it, Jeff? They pick out the very strong intellectual types, the ones with the high IQs, and they'll target them specifically in like the Dugan organization.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what they go for students from wealthier families and the brighter students. They do this, I was told by an expert on Africa and the Middle East. This is going on all over Africa and the Middle East, these Telegram channels where Dugan is educating teenagers. And they offer them these programs, and they offer them money even. And then they bring them along, and then they end up getting them working for them, writing for their publications, because remember, their outreach is to all these different countries and languages. So they need, dozens of languages if they're going to, affect all these countries. And of course, the major languages. And they need to reach target different cultural groups: Catholics in the Latin countries, Protestants in certain other countries, Muslims in certain Middle Eastern and African countries, and so on. And they use perennialism, which is the idea that you keep your religion, but all religions are really one religion, and all tradition is really just against liberalism in America. And it's Eurasianism versus Atlanticism. And of course, that's us, America. If you could just eradicate the Americans, right? And then they can tie that in with some groups with anti-Semitism.
Yeah, the thing we must confront is the absolute organized nature of our opposition. The conservative movement is pretty ad hoc. It just does what it reacts to this, reacts to that. The left-wing movement, the fascists and the communists are super organized. They have whole institutes, like the Institute for the Study of US and Canada in Moscow, that have hundreds of people who just work on America and Canada. They know every politician. They know our sporting culture. They know history, religion, you name it. So they can target their messages very effectively. Well, the growth of anti-Semitism on the right in America in the last 5 years has gone from near zero to ubiquitous, and that's completely a Russian operation. Well, how much organization had to go into that? How well do they have to know American culture to pull that one off?
Well, they know our Constitution better than we do. They sit down and they study the stuff for decades. They've got experts and psychologists and everything else. And even to the psychological aspect, doing reverse psychological operations or active measures, they specifically weaponize psychology against us. I mean, if you look at the way that the Russians, and that's not even saying anything to the Chinese or anyone else, but if you just look at the way that the Russians or the Soviets practice psychology, we don't have anything like it. The way that they teach their people and the way that they instruct their operatives and their domestic officers and their counterintelligence people in psychological methods, it is completely antithetical to what we understand. We don't even understand it. We have nothing like it whatsoever.
Yeah, we cannot comprehend organized evil. We can't. Look, when my friend, his former New Zealand communist, was training in Moscow in 1983 from New Zealand, they had at the Lenin School, they had 16 experts on New Zealand alone at that school. Many of them who had lived in New Zealand undercover, meaning that they knew our sporting culture, our history, our religion, and they used psychology when they planned New Zealand's anti-nuclear legislation in the 1980s, which pushed New Zealand out of the Australia, New Zealand, United States military alliance. They planned that campaign very well to appeal to New Zealand psychology. It wasn't an anti-American campaign because they knew that, Kiwis loved the Yanks. It had to be all about playing on New Zealand psychology, that we're a little country, but we like to think we punch above our weight on the world stage. So this was going to be about Kiwis standing against the nuclear arms race. New Zealanders striking an independent foreign policy course. They had the slogans all worked out. They had the psychology all worked out to tie in with how the public opinion in New Zealand. They didn't make dumb mistakes and try and run an anti-American campaign like they might in some Asian country or whatever. They were dealing with a pro-American ally, and how do we get them to break away from the States? It couldn't be anti-American. It had to be pro-New Zealand independence. And that's how they do these things. They will take.
this is what the free world doesn't understand, is that we have an enemy and they have the best brains in the world. Like, they get a lot of the technology and scientific stuff. They get it from us. They buy it. They steal it. We train their students and they go back home with the new technology. They work here in our laboratories, research and development, but their best brains are in the Soviet Academy of Sciences. Within that, you have the Institute for Study USA and Canada. There's another institute that studies world religions, another one that studies the Middle East, another one for Central Asian republics. And Antonio Gramsci, a communist in Italy, he figured out in Italy that there's separate regions. So northern Italy is different than central Italy. It's different this region, that region, different than the Italians in Sicily. So he devised a plan that you have to target the area, the specific conditions of people in every area. So everybody is influenced or impacted by the communist movement. And I have here, I won't read it all, there's too many in here, but this is A Road to Socialism USA. This is 2005, American Communist Party. There's a section on African Americans, a section on Mexican Americans, a section on Puerto Ricans, a section on American Indians, another one in other indigenous peoples. There's another section in here on immigrants, another section on Arabs and the Middle East peoples, Asians, Asian Americans. This is all different populations in America, how they're all specifically targeted to history. Then there's a struggle for women, a struggle for youth. It goes on and on and on. Gays and lesbians, farmers and rural population, youth and students, each one. And then it describes how the communists will work with each group for their most obvious immediate needs. And then they go to the next need. And before you know it, after a series of needs being met by the communists then get so much influence and trust and respect from the people they just helped. And then that gives them more influence to teach people, you're really never going to be totally free and equal until we have a socialist system. So it's the way a pedophile would groom a kid. A pimp might do a similar thing with a girl. He may not be the violent type. It's a process, and you have to get your foot in the door. So they help people with their most immediate needs. And you do this with every single population, every single area, city, every different group. Everybody is targeted. And then some people are targeted to go off the deep end and discredit the conservative side or the Christian side. And our side, the free world, can't comprehend.
Types, no?
What was that?
That's the Nick Fuentes types. That's the Candace Owens types.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You did right, Jimmy. But just another little internet message I got today. Yesterday, after that threat got put out on me, there's somebody put a message down below and said, listening to Trevor, said, I was a groiper. I was a Nick Fuentes guy for 3 years. It was listening to Trevor Loudon and his friends. I think he mentioned Jeff as well. It was listening to them that got me out of groiperism, that got me out of it was just. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I think, I think a lot of people listen to these kind of things, and we're the only guys out there talking about the right path here, we've got communism, we're giving communism on one side and fascism on the other. Those are our only two alternatives. And that isn't true. And we're some of the few people that are actually articulating it in those terms, so that people can, self-correct, basically.
Well, that's because you've actually taken the time to go to sit down and do the research into what's actually happening. It's like, and Jeff's made this analogy before. Once you know the combination to a lock, there is no lock, right? Or Jimmy, you've made that analogy. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And it's once you understand how these mind games are played, they don't work on you. It's that simple. You cannot, like the four of us that are sitting here and the people that are listening, we cannot be brainwashed by this garbage. It's easy to get sucked into it if you have absolutely no idea what's going on. And that's the whole point of the active measures agenda, is they turn everything around, they turn it upside down, they turn it inside out, so you can't figure out what's actually happening, and you give up and you just go with whatever agenda and with whatever the crowd goes along with. Jeff's talked about this book before, Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd. And you just go with it. Very recommended,
yeah.
Yeah, you just go with it.
Stalin and Hitler studied that book, by the way.
Yeah, and you just go with it. This is how the crowd is manipulated. Well, we're not part of that crowd, and we cannot be manipulated. Go ahead, Jimmy.
We're basically, so the masses are programmed without them knowing it. And the communists always stress that everything, it's a movement, but it's also a process. That's the word they use a lot. Everything is a process. I use the analogy, you're born, you lie down, then you could roll over and your parents applaud, and then your first time you could stand. And you just experienced that recently there, Trevor, in your family, your little kid. Then they take the first step. And then before you know it, they're running. And years later, they're on a track team. Everything is a process. So people start out fresh, clean, and pure. And the enemy now, teaching 3-year-old covered transgenders talk and read books to 3- and 4-year-old kids, that's the beginning of the process of destruction of the child's mind. And this is done. The enemy is diabolical. It's absolutely evil, and they have a following. I played pool last night in a bar, and we had to play partners. I don't like to play partners, but I wear my Trump hat, and I ended up being a partner with a guy I didn't know. He just came in the bar, a black guy. And but the other people were kind of amused that I'm playing pool with a black guy on my team. They couldn't believe that a guy wearing a Trump hat could have friendly relations with a black guy. Now, these are not bad people, these leftists I'm talking about in the bar. I know them. But it just shows you how their mind could get warped to the point where they don't understand anything. And they were shocked. It's like when I came home from the inauguration for Trump, when I was got brought back to New York, and then I had to take the subway. I'm sitting in the train with my Trump hat. And the train, all the seats are taken, and a middle-aged black woman walks in, and she's standing next to me. And meanwhile, across from me was a white woman, give me the evil eye. She was staring at me because of my Trump hat. She was letting me know how she hates me, the way she was staring at me. When I got up to give my seat to a black woman, the white woman watching was so shocked. It was almost like a car when the engine misfires and it's popping and the car's jerking because it's not operating. She looked like that. She was so shocked that I, with a Trump hat, got up to give my seat to a black woman. These people, and I don't think they're bad people, just that the process, they reach the point where they're kind of like borderline insane. And we're trying to undo. We're trying to deprogram people on a massive scale. They were programmed. And we're trying to do is basically kind of a deprogramming, just using knowledge, facts, and documentation.
Well, maybe, and if you guys will indulge me with a little bit of a couple of minutes just to humor you here, maybe we're all looking at this wrong, because maybe we need to go to Russia to understand. Take a listen to this.
Hello, Eddie. This is a pleasure to be here in your studio, Russia Up Close project. You worked 30 years in Texas in law enforcement. You've been in different positions, but now you're in Russia. Please tell us your personal story, why you moved here, and what you did in law enforcement of the United States.
Evgeny, thank you so much. It'd be my pleasure to discuss that with you. But first of all, I want to say thank you for coming to the Russia Up Close studios. It invited me to have this conversation about policing in America. To answer your question, I did spend 30 years in a variety of positions in law enforcement in Texas, all along the border region. So have a lot of experience dealing with crimes associated with human trafficking, drug trafficking, organized crime. I retired in 2019, but just prior to retiring, I met a wonderful Russian woman in 2017. And shortly thereafter, my retirement, I asked her to be my wife. And I was retired. I had already been to Russia several times. I fell in love with as I say, I fell in love with the girl and I fell in love with the country. So when I retired, it was like, okay, I'm moving to Russia. My immigrating to Russia has everything to do with love and has nothing to do with either running away from ideology that I don't agree with in America, which there are plenty. I wanted to get to know Russia. And the only way to do that is to live here. I thank God because I had a soft landing, which means I had the opportunity to leave that madness that is in America, but just the calmness of Russia.
Oh.
So refreshing coming from the noise and the chaos in the United States. So I'm very blessed and very fortunate to be living here in Moscow.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. I know you want to. He lives in Moscow.
All we need is love. All we need is love. And then the other Beatles song, Back to the USSR.
Oh no,
So
how
that's
lucky
all
you
you
are
need.
back in the USSR.
You know, this guy's just listened to too many of the Beatles songs.
I got a friend up. He's a black guy. He's Christian conservative, and he has quite a popular radio show. And he takes a very anti-Ukraine, pro-Russian line. And I was talking to him about this, and he said, "Oh, yeah, Russia is so Christian. They pick up my radio show in Moscow. They broadcast it from Moscow, and I'm assuming they pay him something for that. So this is." You know, you play to the guy's ego.
There's all these English speakers and listeners in Moscow interested in listening to him.
That's what they did with this guy. They gave this guy, they brought this guy to Russia. They recruited him in the U.S., you know, the lovely Russian woman that he met 2 years before his retirement. They recruited him specifically. They took him, he lives in Moscow. Nobody just moves to Moscow. It doesn't work that way, especially if you're a foreigner. And then he gets this big, massive studio and podcasting platform all paid for.
His wife is the security services of the Russian Federation.
There you go. And another person that they've done this to is Rick Sanchez. Trevor, you know who this guy is, the guy that used to work for CNN. They've got him. You know, they gave him a big fat RT contract, and they moved him over to Moscow. And he interviewed a former congressman. You guys will know who he is, Michael Flanagan. Does that sound right? You guys know who he was? Former congressman. Yeah, former congressman from Illinois. And they were talking about the issue involving Ukraine and Crimea just the other day. Listen to this.
From the beginning, I mean, the Crimea has always left me shaking my head. I mean, this is Catherine the Great. This is Potemkin villages. This is the Crimean War. This is Russian. It just is. And because Khrushchev administratively transferred it to the Ukraine for 10 minutes internally, and everyone shrugged and said, oh, well, okay, whatever. It was all still Russia. It was all still the Soviet Union, at least. Then when it broke up, this is gone now. And well, wait, that's got to come back. I don't understand the argument over it. I also don't. The Donbass is much the same thing. The borders that Ukraine and Russia have are an internal creation of the Soviet Union. They are not historic borders. Now, Europe. There are no historic borders in Europe. If you go back 150 years and anyone in Europe, the borders move. I mean, it's a European thing. That's how that works. But the Crimea, particularly defeating the colonate there. I mean, the leftover of the Golden Horde. It's a glorious and dramatic victory, and one that they've held on to. Being one of the great successes of Russia. So to say all those people down there saying we're Russian, what they're telling you is, my family's been here for a couple of 100 years, and we're Russian. And why would you ask such a question?
You know what I also asked them was, or what they were telling me was, they like the fact that they get maternity leave. They like the security. They like the fact that they have, compensation for so many days off a year. They like their health insurance. So by being Russian, it's not just, I get to be Russian. No, there's certain services and certain things that come along with being a resident of Russia that they told me they prefer over, I mean, this is, a concrete answer, but what they would have if they were Ukrainian.
It's the first time I ever heard
certainly
somebody
true.
use the term Potemkin village while he's taken in by one. And the glorious Golden Horde, which comes down from the Mongols that was threatening the civilization of Europe, the Golden Horde. Yeah, the Russians are the Mongols. It's right. Destroy the West. Unbelievable.
This type of propaganda. You see what I'm saying? I'm playing these things to make a point. They bring in these English speakers. They bring in these English speakers and they take them into Moscow. They give them these big fat contracts, give them all these high quality production studios, and throw all kinds of money at them. And all of that is aimed here to give everybody. And this is what's picked up. by the woke right is the point I'm trying to make here. Is they pick this stuff up.
Exactly.
These guys are barely literate. The fact that he could even memorize the word Golden Horde and Potemkin Village, he's never read any books about them. Never thought about it.
The communists, they know psychology and psychiatry. They know how the brain works. Most conservatives say socialism doesn't work because they don't understand, the psychology. That's only in the economics. So economics in the communist system doesn't work. It can't work. But the subversion, the perversion, the deception, it works perfectly. The communists are masters at that. So imagine a guy meeting a beautiful Russian woman, and if she's an enemy agent, like a lot of them are, they targeted people here. The women are trained they know the psychology. They know what men want to hear. They know what men need to hear. They're probably also trained in some very extremely interesting sexual things that maybe men desire, because they know when they're targeting somebody, they have to have somebody sent to the target who's able to have like all the keys to open up that person to be pulled in. So to somebody to go to Russia and thinking what he's seeing when he's living is like he's on a stage, like there's a play going on. So everybody's acting, all the scenery, everything's fake. You're on a stage. So they pull you on the stage, and then you really think that you're part of the scenery, part of everything that's going on, and it's all a deception. But then those people become salesmen for that system, for that country. This guy that was just talking is like totally brainwashed by superior people, the demonic people that know how to manipulate people. But then that person goes out to be a very good salesman as an American who left here and went to Russia. That just shows you the depths of that the communists will do. They'll study and train, and everybody is targeted either with discrediting, like the January 6th thing in Washington. They had agitators among the crowd. They work. Everybody is influenced. Now, I had friends years ago. I was loosely connected with groups like the Christian Coalition, and some of these groups were out in the street where drugs were and prostitution, and they would try to lure people to come, and they'll pray for them and try to get them away to get them help. And so many prostitutes really believe that their pimp loves them, but that was a process that got her in that belief. That's like what this guy here would go to Russia, and then he becomes like a sworn testimony, eyewitness account. The person is totally under control and doesn't realize it by the best manipulators in the world. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. Scary.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh no, it's.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was just interested in. The thing that we are dealing with is that this is so highly organized, as Trevor mentioned earlier. So highly organized and coming from state actors that pour all their resources. When Jimmy says, socialism doesn't work, but the rest of it works, they don't care if their people live in poverty, if they have a miserable, grinding life. That's what life is like in those countries. And you wonder why Russians are much easier to manage, why they go to the front, why they die when they're told to die. It's because their whole lives, their least thing that they get is conditional on their obedience, many of them.
Yeah, I was looking into, and I was, as you and I were on the phone earlier today, I was telling you about something we're going to be discussing tomorrow with Lee about this Polish railway sabotage operation.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, one of the, who I believe to be the organizer of it, and where this individual comes from, where his assignment was, all the way out on, one of the far eastern districts. And if you go out there and you have a look around, I mean, it's very unforgiving to live in. I mean, it's just this.
Oh yeah,
I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, I could not imagine living in something like that. I just couldn't. And that's not a dig at the at the Russian people that live there. I'm just saying, I'm trying to put a finer point on what you're saying is they don't care if you live in poverty in these countries.
Yeah.
They don't care if your standard of living is down in the dumps. They don't care.
Yeah, in the Soviet Union, they wanted to increase the population of Siberia by 50% or something like that. I think they really wanted to double it. And they would just take people and say, you're moving here. You're going to live, just to colonize it. And it was horrible. It was largely considered an economic failure. But, they believe in, rather than economic logic, market logic, which serves people's interests and needs, they believe in the state logic. And that is about power. It's about conquest. It's about controlling people's bodies. And that's what they do, and killing people. and ruining people.
I think that's one of the biggest misnomers we have. And, General Hodges mentioned that. And I've read this in books like Soviet Strategic Deception, which was written by
Joe Douglas.
Well, no, he wrote a chapter in there, which was great. But there were so many people that put that
there were
together.
dozens of scholars in that book. Yes,
but it was published and put out by our Naval Postgraduate Institute. And I specifically recall in there, and it's something that General Hodges mentioned when we talked to him, that he's been guilty of, I've been guilty of, and many others have been guilty of, is something called mirror image.
Yes.
And you think to the economic, just speaking of the economic side of things, you think that because we look at markets the way we do, they look at markets the same way we do. And that's not true. That is not true at all.
No, the Anglo-Saxon tradition in politics is very different from the Russian tradition. They're sort of polar opposites. We stem from, you have the British parliamentary tradition, and of course, America revolted was part of the British Empire. We carried those. It's carried in the English language, the understandings. It goes back to the Magna Carta, actually, and the kind of organic struggles where people got degrees of freedom. In Russia, the peasants weren't, they were basically slaves. They were trapped on the land until the 1860s. I think it was around the time of the American Civil War that the Tsar emancipated the serfs, around the time we were emancipating the black slaves in the U.S. So, and that's basically most of the Russian population were serfs, more than around 90%, I think. So they have not been free that long, the Russians.
No, they have not. And with the collapse, quote, collapse of the Soviet Union, that's what was promised. And now that promise is being reeled back in.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Karen DeWish's book, Putin's Kleptocracy and other writings, you see that the whole thing economically was a fraud. Putin, as a deputy mayor of St. Petersburg, was a fraud. That whole thing, Sobchak, who he worked for, the mayor of St. Petersburg, that was a fraud. Yeltsin was a fraud. Gorbachev before him was a fraud. What they did is they did loosen the controls on the people so that a 29% Russian middle class, but it's a poor middle class and it's not favored by the state. They are taxed. And because they don't want autocratic government, they're basically hated by the government. Putin would like to eradicate the Russian middle class. And the middle class in this circumstance doesn't mean wealthy people. It means people that work for themselves or people who work for the people that work for themselves that aren't part of the system. And that system goes back to Trotsky saying, nobody can revolt against us. We employ everybody. They'd be unemployed the minute they revolted.
We are coming up to our final minutes here. It's been a very, very productive conversation today. I mean, as they always are, but today it's like I blinked and it was over. So we're going to have to start to wind down here. Trevor, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think we are in a period of major confusion. We don't know which way it's going to go. We don't know what Trump's going to do with Ukraine. We don't know what the peace deal is going to bring. We don't know what kind of secret deals are being hatched with Russia behind the scenes. We don't know the extent of the influence of the Putin Republicans in the direction of the State Department, etc. We don't know who the supposed good guys, allegedly Marco Rubio and others, and what their position is in fighting back. So the fate of the Western world, the general direction of the Western world, I think is going to be pushed one way or another in the next few weeks, to be honest.
If people want to follow your work, sir, and support what you do, how can they do that?
Yeah, just go to trevorloudon.com. My books and videos, etc., are available there, or go to my website, keywiki.org, which has over 180,000 files of communist socialists. Big page on Dugin, big page on Lavrov, big page on Putin. If you think that Putin's a Christian, read my page and then get back to me.
Very good. All right. Jeff, final thoughts.
Yes, we are in an age of confusion, and that confusion has been spread by the psychological warfare, the active measures, the disinformation of Russia, and also China getting into our economy, into our markets, and nobody's really stood up to it. It seems that the U.S. Constitution, bourgeois society, freedom has sort of failed because the vigilance and the intellectual acuity and the actual studying and the honesty of the people that ended up in charge of education, academia, military, the political system, all across the board, they failed us. They did not do their diligence. They did not understand what was happening. They signed up for things that compromised them. And our system is now a mess. And I think we're going to see that President Trump's administration is going to be a train wreck. We've got a scandal going on with Secretary of War Hegseth. murdering helpless people in the water after they've blown their boats out of the water. I think we're going to be appalled. We had German admirals in World War II put on trial, like Admiral Dönitz, for the killing of crews of ships that were sunk by U-boats. He was exonerated. He didn't do that. But is our Secretary of State worse than a Nazi admiral? I hope not.
I hope not. But boy, he looks good on TV, doesn't he? Yeah, he looks good. He sounds good.
Good image. Good. Yeah. But I think he's a knucklehead.
Yes, he certainly is. I would absolutely agree with that. If people want to follow your work and support you, Jeff, how can they do it?
jrnyquist.blog, and also my webpage, or my page on Amazon, J.R. Nyquist. You can get my books there.
Very good. Jimmy, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Well, we've talked a lot. Some of the talk before we do the show, before and after, very interesting discussions there that is not heard by the audience. All the things we heard about Golitsyn, it's all in communist publications. Take away the image of the enemy to strengthen the socialist forces in the capitalist countries. And Lenin's party of a new type, that's the Communist Party. Everybody in the party has to reach out. Everybody, every country, every city, every corner of every place over the entire world is influenced one way or another, either to be extreme right-wing crazy, that's to discredit the so-called right-wing, or to push for socialism. All of it is open. It's in communist publications, and I've been exposing it. Trevor, you guys have been exposing it. So we are in a fix. I think the Hegseth thing and the people in the water, I think that was debunked. I think it was the admiral that they're saying made that final order. I don't think the American people are going to have too much sympathy for people who are killing us with drugs. 1,300,000 Americans died of fentanyl and heroin over the last 20 years or so. And the enemy is at war with us. They're killing us. So if we kill them, I don't think people are going to be too. But the left, the liberals, are going to use this. They're definitely going to use it, accusing us of being war criminals. So I've been making the case that the Democrats and the cheating in the elections and all of that stuff, they get their guy in, they send us the virus to change how we vote. So got our guy out, their guy in. So I say that's treason. And their treason caused the death of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of unarmed, non-combatant civilian Americans. So that makes those people not only traitors, but war criminals. And now the left, the communist side, the Democrats, the media are pushing our side as being war criminals. It's amazing. So that's the position we're in. We've been trying to counter it. We've been trying to expose it and build a movement against it. So I have a lot of interviews with Jeff. That's JRNYQUIST, jrnyquist.blog. I think I did 20, Jeff. Was that it with you? 1 hour interviews? I also
around 2021, yeah.
I do this interview with you guys combined, which I'm very impressed the more I learn from you guys. And that's, of course, Dynamic Independence. And recently I've been doing interviews with Lee, and I have my own channel, believe it or not, and it's rumble.com, and I'm Jimmy from Brooklyn. Occasionally I find stuff on the internet, my calls to Bob Grant radio shows, so that stuff is out there. I just don't know how to retrieve it. So I'm Jimmy from Brooklyn. I did a lot of talking about this and copying publications. Look, most of what's going on is in the enemy publications, and that's the problem. It's out there. It's not even really a conspiracy, because a conspiracy is usually something that's kind of quiet, like in the background, sort of the underground. Well, what we are the underground. We us here that are doing these things we do every Wednesday. We are the resistance, and the communists have it totally flipped. That we're fascist and the communists are the resistance, like World War II. Because that was a beautiful romantic thing. The resistance against Hitler. That was a beautiful, tragic part of history. It was beautiful, though, the underground resistance to the Nazis, how they fought. So the communists are playing on that sort of romantic sentiment. But really, they're the ones that are the danger. We are the resistance. And people have to wake up to that. And if they do, I think we'd be heading in a better direction. And again, I want to thank you guys for letting me participate in this. Every time we do this, I learn so much. I just wish I'd learned some good news. But, we got to be immersed in this to really grasp it and understand it. Hopefully bring our understanding of it to the broader public so we could turn it around.
That's well said, Jimmy. It's been a great conversation, and you're always welcome here, as I said. Look forward to having all of you back next week. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to all the listeners. God bless everyone, and have a great evening.